welcome to the Yarn Parlor. I'm Alison. You can find me on Instagram and Ravelry as A-Levitt1. I live in Tel Aviv, Israel, and this is my podcast about knitting, spinning, and knitwear design. Thank you to all new viewers and to all returning viewers. Thanks for watching. Speaking of viewers, I wanted to say hi to Pat. Pat is a viewer who wrote me a very lovely message, so I just wanted to say thank you, Pat. Today is March 22nd, Tuesday, and it's episode 10. I made it to the double digits. I'm very excited about this. It was a little shaky about my feelings towards starting a podcast, but I'm very excited about it overall. I've met some really great people, so I think I'm going to continue. So since it's episode 10, I'm going to add in a little bit of more stuff. Adding more stuff. Last episode was, I tried to make it short, but it was still like 33 minutes, which was an average podcast for me. This one might be a little bit longer though, because I'm going to go over problems that I had with my design. I'm going to talk about my schedule. Karen had asked about how often I craft or knit, and so I started writing this really long message about like breaking down my time schedule, and I was like, Lara from the Font Knits talked about how she did her work schedule a couple episodes back, and I thought it was really interesting, so I was like, maybe I'll just share with you guys about my daily, not daily routine, but like overall my week, how it kind of goes and plays out. I wanted to talk a little bit about living in Israel, my whips. I want to highlight a indie yarn dyer today, and then I'll end it with spinning. So starting with my design, I think I hit all my intro points. Just got to make sure. Oh, show notes you can find in the Ravelry group. So starting with my design, this year I'm working on, if you're a new viewer, I'm working on getting my foot in the door of knitwear design, writing patterns and self-publishing them. So my first pattern, I've written patterns for myself before, but I haven't professionally written patterns, and I usually write them in this shorthand that only I could decipher and understand. So it was a bit of a complication to actually write a pattern, and I normally don't. I just recently started knitting from other people's patterns, so I don't know the wording, I don't know the lingo, I don't know properly how to set it up. And you wouldn't think that you wouldn't normally think about it when you're like, oh yeah, I'm going to design knitwear, that this would be an issue, like a thing of like, okay, so how do you start? Like, how do you actually start? Cast on stitches. But then you have to talk about like the needle size and how many stitches. And so it was a little bit harder than I thought it was going to be. I thought I was going to have this pattern. If you watch the first episode, I was like, in 2 weeks, I'm going to have a pattern published. It's been 2 months. So it definitely was harder for me than I thought it was going to be, which when you start out, I think is kind of how it goes. You don't take into account all of these things. So now for next time, it's going to be much easier, hopefully, fingers crossed, that writing this pattern will be easier because I've hit all of those hardships. I've hit knowing now what I have to, what I'm going to have to do. So the pattern is for this tank, and so the problems that I had were the wordage of how to write a knitwear pattern. And I took a Craftsy class. I think it's actually just called like wording patterns or how to write a pattern. I don't know. It's in there. You'll find it. I love Craftsy. I'm obsessed with Craftsy. I am so obsessed with Craftsy. I like all their, even if all of it isn't great information for you, I feel like you still take like that little nugget away, and I think that makes it all worth it. This class was a huge help to me because I didn't know the wordage. I'm very good with technical aspects, and I'm good with keeping my words the same and having a uniformed layout. I'm good with that, but I just didn't know how to start, how to switch rows, how to, and I found I had more construction, or different construction. I had a different construction from even what that class was telling me, so I hit a couple brick walls with that because I didn't know how to word it and I wasn't being told how to word it. So I had to like come up with things. So for when I finally publish this, if any of you buy it, keep in mind. No, I think it's more, I'm finding my own writing style, and I think that can differentiate from designer to designer is how they actually write out their patterns. So that I don't have a problem with. My other problem that I had was the grading. So I got my wording down, I wrote out my whole pattern, and then I went back and did my grading and filled in the rows, like the different stitches and row counts for the different sizes. That, my head was spinning after a couple days of doing all that math. I was like, Now I know I also bought the grading Craftsy class. I didn't quite make it through the whole thing because I was like, I just need to get this done. Maybe next time I'll make it through, because I know that there are easier ways. You can set up an Excel spreadsheet and plug in your numbers and your formulas that way, but I just did it all one size at a time type of thing. That worked out fine, but the math was just a lot of math and crammed into like 1 and 2 days. I like couldn't see straight. So, like at the end of working on this pattern at some of those points, I was just like, is it dinner time yet? Like, I just want to stop working on this thing right now. It was a beast for me. It was just a first that I was not prepared for, I guess. And then after all of that, I then went over my size extra large because I'm not test knitting this pattern. I wanted to make sure that my grading was correct. So I figure if I go over my size extra large, that all of the other sizes would work, and if extra large didn't work, then I'd have to fix all the other sizes and go over them. So I went over row by row, stitch count the whole way, and I found a couple huge problems. So that was good because I found those problems and I knew how to correct them. So I wasn't expecting it. Again, I was like, oh, I'll just go over the size extra large, I'm done, everything's great. And then I find these problems and I'm like, more math, more problems, more time. So overall, it isn't discouraging me, and I'm not talking about this because I want to discourage people, or I'm not talking about this because I want to whine about my pattern problems. I wanted to talk about it because these are things that as a designer you come across, and if there is anybody out there who's interested in designing, I think I might talk about these things more or when I come across them, because I think that it can help people. As a new designer, there were a lot of things that I hadn't thought about, and these were just a couple of them. So to keep in mind for all of you designers out there, keep in mind grading. Like after I did this with all the shaping and I have these shifted seams, I was like, maybe I won't do shaping next time. That it did discourage me a little bit from shaping a garment. But now I know for next time, and I'm going to continue watching the grading Craftsy class and coming up with an Excel spreadsheet and a formula. I didn't do that this time, and I think that could have cut a lot of my time. So I kind of like to do everything the long way and harder way first, almost, so that you can understand where you can start cutting the corners. So next time I will probably set up an Excel spreadsheet and plug in formulas to do all my number business so then I don't have to deal with that the next time. It's done now. I sent it off to a tech editor, and my next steps will be publishing it. I'll probably just publish to Ravelry right now. So, I don't know, maybe I'll go over that if you guys are interested in hearing how to publish on Ravelry. Next, I wanted to talk about my schedule. I write my schedule down in a book, because if I didn't write it down, I would get very overwhelmed. And this is the one that I use, is Get to Work book. And I like it. I'm not going to plug it, but I'll put it in the show notes if you're interested in finding a planner that works. So 3 days out of the week, I work on my knitwear design, whether it be sketching, looking at inspiration, knitting, writing the pattern. So 3 days, obviously not every week I do all of those things, but 3 days a week I focus on knitwear design. One day I use for filming this and editing, and then that doesn't take all day, so usually I will knit on non-design stuff that for the rest of today. And one day a week I sew. I'm hoping to open a Etsy store for selling knitwear project bags soon, and so one day a week I focus on cutting and sewing those bags. And then after dinner I'll usually knit. I knit a lot. And I spin. I try to spin at least 3 nights a week, usually like Friday, and then on the weekends I will work on my spinning. Sometimes if I'm like over knitting and just not feeling creative and overwhelmed, I'll pick up my spinning, because it's quite an easy, I find it more relaxing than knitting, because you don't even have to think about it at all. There's no thought process when it comes to spinning, at least for me. At least right now, in my beginning stages, I just kind of do it. Unless I'm trying a new technique, and then I focus a little bit more. And that's usually my schedule. But if I didn't write down everything, I'm definitely a list person. I write down my schedule, because if I didn't, I would get extremely overwhelmed. And even then, I still get a little bit overwhelmed. This weekend, I kind of snapped and had one of those overwhelming moments, because I was sewing and my needle broke, and I just got frustrated, and I just couldn't take it anymore. So I was like, I need to stop this. I need to stop all of my crafty things. I need to just sit and relax. I put on some TV and took a break from everything. But in general, that is how I run my schedule, run my week. On to living in Israel. I wanted to talk a little bit about this because I've had a couple questions about living in Israel, and I thought I would add some stuff in here. Maybe, I hope that this isn't too long, and I don't want to do it every episode, but maybe sharing a little bit occasionally might interest a couple of you. So I moved to Israel with my husband and our cat about 1.5 years ago, and from Hawaii. And we moved here because of his work. He is in the tech scene, in startup tech scene. And he also has a family that lives in Jerusalem. We live right near the Jaffa port, which is the oldest port in the world. And that's one of there are a couple things that I wanted to talk about that are my favorite things about Israel. One is the food. The food is amazing. And 2 is the architecture. So the food is really fresh because importing things is quite expensive. So a lot of the stuff here is made here, grown here. The food is always really fresh and yummy, and most things are made from scratch. We have a bakery right near us, and everything is just delicious. And the architecture, I love. That was one of the first things that I noticed, which was really weird because I'm not an architecture lover. It's not something that I would regularly notice, but there's a ton of Bauhaus in Tel Aviv, and just this mingling of old and there's lots of new construction, and there's also like they keep the structures of the old buildings. So you'll just be walking along and see this like new taller buildings. I mean, they don't have many skyscrapers here, so it's not skyscraper, but like newer buildings. And then you just find all these like old stone, small alleyway type of streets and structures, and you realize that you're in a historical place. You don't think about it all the time, but all of a sudden your brain will just switch and be like, whoa, like where are we right now? What year am I in? Because it's just so unique, especially in the old city in Jerusalem. I love going there and walking through these. It's like a labyrinth in there. It's incredible. I definitely love that aspect. Moving here was a huge culture shock for me, but I will talk about that in another episode because I don't want to make this too long. But those are a couple things that I love about living here, and hopefully I'll share some more with you next episode, every other episode. You know, I don't want to do this all the time, but that's a little bit about my life in Israel. This is a knitting podcast, by the way, so I will go on to my knitting. I will shoot through my whips because they're the same ones that I've been working on for weeks. So there's new growth to them, but I just want to get some new stuff on my needles. But I'm working on this cowl. This is the exploration station, and I stopped in the middle of a row. Why does that happen? Shoot. Okay, so this is my exploration station. It's a cowl with Eric from Sticks Plus Twine. And I made it through the brioche section. And I started the slip stitch section, which is the section 3. I just don't want to lose my stitches. Oh, that was so silly of me. So section 2 was until March 20th, and then Eric, on his timeline, his lovely planned out timeline, I'm excited about it. I'm still like, I cast on all the things. So the fact that I'm focused on this and staying with his timeline and actually moving and progressing with it is a huge accomplishment on my part, but I'm dying to cast on more stuff. But I am excited because I'm going to have an exploration station at the end of this, so who wouldn't be excited? I'm using size 6, 4mm, and for the brioche I used US 5, 3.75 because a lot of people, brioche just makes a bigger stitch. So I'm happy that I did that. It's still loose and squishy, so it didn't like suck it in. You don't even notice it, I mean, you can clearly see it's still like a huge stitch. Yeah, from here to here. And my yarns, please check in show notes from past episodes, because I've gone over them like 3 times, or just watch past episodes. I liked the brioche, but I'm happy that it's over with. I think it just knitting the same row twice was kind of like, it was hard. That's my description word for it. I think it has almost the same feeling as knitting socks 2 at a time, because you almost feel like you're not going anywhere. Like when you have to knit the row a second time, I was trying to make it feel like it was a completely separate row, but it's in his instructions, it's like row 1 and then like row 1. So there are like 2 row 1s, so you feel like you haven't moved anywhere. because I just knit the same row twice. And I think that's most people's frustration. I say this, but I have no idea, so I'm totally making this up. But my frustration was having to knit a row twice. Yeah, moving on to the slip stitch section, I only have like two or one rows done of that, so. And then section 3 he has until April 1st, and then sections 4 and 5 until mid-April, I think it is. So mid-April, after mid-April, I'm casting on like 4 things, no joke, just in the same day. I'm just gonna cast on things to get it out of my system because it's a lot of self-control to just knit on these couple of projects and not cast on anything new. Still a bit shaky if cals are really for me, but I don't know. We'll see how I feel after I finish this, because then I'll probably be like, this was the greatest thing because I finished a shawl in like a month and a half and I did it and it's done and I have it. I have a finished product. Next is my March socks. On the No Makers Wabbit Season, Duck Season, here was my stitch marker. My progress keeper. Here's my progress keeper from the last time. So I turned the heel and I'm working on the leg now. I'm making these. These are the surprise stripes from Johanna. They are over the knee socks. They have, hers you use one of those magic stripey balls or whatever they're called. You just kind of wind up a whole bunch of sock yarn and stripe it together to get these funky striped socks. I'm just knitting it plain, but it's a stockinette sock with a 3x3 cuff. It's a free pattern, not giving anything away. And a garter heel. This thing is so cool. It looks like such a short sock compared to all the other socks that I've knit so far, but it stretches so much and it hugs your heel. So I really hope that this heel wears well because I love it. And it's knit so that it goes to the front a little bit, which I also like because my instep, I usually add more, or I have been adding more stitches to my instep, the top of my foot, to accommodate for the width of my foot, obviously. But the heel, the heel continues to the front a little bit for a couple rows, which I really like because it adds a nice width there. And I really like this heel. So I'm going to continue working on these. Like I said, these are my March socks, but I'm going to allow myself to knit them March and April since they are over the knee socks. I just do not want to push myself and get upset that I'm knitting and then just like resent the socks and hate them and not want to work on them. Because I think it'll be really cool, and I've been enjoying them so far. They've just been like my relaxing knitting, and I want to keep it that way. So 2 months to knit over the knee socks. I think that's a good timeline. And I'll still knit my April socks concurrently, but just give myself more time for the longer socks. Next is, my March swatch. So I didn't really want to show the swatch challenge swatch, but I kind of stumbled upon something that I want to talk about in this episode. So the next episode, I will go over all 3 swatches and talk about the yarn more. But so this swatch is my traveling lace swatch. The yarn I'm using is Woolfolk Snow, and it's a marled 2-ply. And I chose this stitch pattern because I wanted to show Did I say it was traveling? Traveling Vine, I think, is the stitch design. And I just realized I didn't talk about my needles on my socks. I'm using US 1s, 2.25 Chow Goose. Moving on. These needles are a 4, I think. Why did I not write it? Nope, didn't write it down. They are a 4, 3.5 millimeter. And this is the traveling vine, yeah. So the effect that I wanted with this traveling vine is that the marled pattern you could see the motion of the stitches better. I wanted to see what marled yarn looked like in a lace pattern first of all. And then I chose the traveling one because I wanted to see if the marled stitch, if you could see the motion of it, like it gave like an illusion. The thing that I'm noticing, Karen, you did point out that it will change after I block, and I completely agree with you. And so I'll talk about that in the next episode when it's blocked. But right now, I don't think it looks like it's traveling like how I wanted it to. So I was like, maybe if I had a higher contrast or lighter colors, you could see the marling like change its direction and move with the stitches. And I happen to have some. So I started knitting on this yarn, which is a different yarn, but it's a marled contrast. And it's kind of tripping me out on here. Hopefully I don't bother you too much with it. But it looks like snow on a TV screen. So this is Cascade Yarns Baby Alpaca Chunky, which is 100% baby alpaca, and I'm using size 10 needles, which is the suggested size. And I see the stitch motion a little bit better, but I don't know if I'm really getting what I'm looking for. So I'll continue with these two and I'll block them and I'll see, and I'll comment next week. But I wanted to show you my additional swatch that I'm doing with a different yarn. But I mean, this is the whole point kind of this swatch challenge, is to use a different yarn every month and to be inspired by the yarn and to try different stitch patterns and have these ideas of, oh, that's not what I really wanted. Maybe it would work in a different yarn. And I didn't technically want to bring in other yarns, but it kind of spurred this whole other inspiration. So we'll see how it goes with the other yarn, with the higher contrast between the two marled yarns. Next is my second design that I'm working on. I showed this a couple episodes back and I've started to work on it again now that I've gotten that other pattern off my plate. It was taking up a lot of my time and a doozy in my mind. I forgot to put a progress keeper, but the last episode I showed, I just had the bottom rib, so now I'm starting on the striped body. And this is going to be a boxy tee spring summer design with the shifted seam incorporated again, just like the tank top. So the yarns I'm using are Barocco Captiva. Oh, let me show you the tag and not the yarn. Which is this, it's a stiffer yarn and it has this shiny, I think it's a polyester, yeah, shiny polyester wrapped around it. So it's 60 cotton, 23 polyester, and 17 acrylic. So this is the black color, but it has a nice shine to it. I've been very, last year I bought a lot of interesting textured yarns, and now I'm trying to incorporate them into designs because I haven't really found anything that I absolutely love. What else? Oh, the second yarn, the striping for this one is Habu Textiles. It is N94 silk wrapped paper is what it's called, but it's linen wrapped with a silk thread. It feels like paper. It's very stiff, but I found it their yarns are really fun to me, but visually, but I don't know how to incorporate them, so that's why I've kind of started designing with them. My first design was with Habu, and so it's almost like I'm trying to use up my Habu. Just because I didn't really ever know what to knit with them, because they do create very interesting textures. Both of these yarns work well together because they are stiffer yarns. They're not a wool, so it's not a plump, fluffy stitch. It's a little bit holy visually. But they're perfect for spring and summer. And yeah, so hopefully this pattern will go by quicker. And because there's no shaping, so that's good. Grading will be easy peasy. But I've learned a lot from that pattern to think about while I'm knitting. When I was knitting that tank, I wasn't thinking about grading. I wasn't thinking that a 3x2 rib is really the best option for a bottom hem because of how many stitches I'm going to have to grade the body size. Anyway, it's I'm now thinking about those things when I'm working on that pattern. So hopefully the whole writing the pattern aspect of it will not take as long and will not be as hard for me. Next, I wanted to talk about an indie designer that I love. She's Kaleidoscope Dyeworks. The owner is Allie. The owner and dyer is Allie. Can you see that? Oh. You can find her on Etsy, and I'll obviously put a link in the show notes. I'm obsessed with her yarn. I knit my first pair of socks out of her yarn. And so I just wanted to show off some of her wonderful works, and hopefully you guys will check her out. So these are my first socks. They are ginormous. They are worn a lot. And this is the monkey sock pattern from Cookie A, found on Knitty, and I'll put a link. A lot of people have been knitting these socks, and I wanted a fun first sock, actually. I didn't want to knit a vanilla sock as my first sock, so yeah, so this is my first pair of socks. I washed them in the washing machine and they became quite hairy, so I would probably follow Allie's directions on her tag and hand wash your socks if you use her yarn. It's not a problem, but since they're big socks, I just use them as house socks anyway, so I don't find it a problem. But if you're wearing your socks out, you might want to keep them less fluffy looking, which obviously would make them pill or felt less. So hand wash, I suggest you hand wash her yarn, and she does write that on the tag, so it's not like she advised to wash in the washing machine and then I got hairy socks. Most of her yarns, or most of the ones that I have, I don't want to go over every single detail when I show you the yarn, so I have 75-25 superwash merino and nylon, and I also have some of them are 80/20, so they're perfect for socks. This is the yarn actually that I used for my sock, so you can see the hairy difference maybe. And this colorway is Pixie Crush, or is it Crush Pixie? Pixie Crush. Pixie Dust. No. This one, I have two of her pixies, that's why I'm confused right now. Pixie Crush because it has the pink in it. She also has Pixie Pout in her store right now, which has black in it, and then Neon Pixie, which is speckled neon colors. So I have Star of Bethlehem. I bought, this was her Christmassy colorway, which I liked, because I bought a couple of Christmas, like really Christmassy colorways, so I kind of liked the fact that this one wasn't super Christmassy. And this is Pixie Dust, yeah, which is all the speckles. And I love her speckles. A lot of people like working with stripes because they get excited to get to the next stripe. I love working with speckles because it's more of like, it's almost like more of an instant gratification because every stitch is a different color. So I just keep knitting to see like what color comes next. I get so excited. Okay. I'm sorry. I totally just geek out over her yarn because it really is, every stitch is a different color, and it made me so happy to knit with these socks because I just kept knitting on them because the speckles are just amazing in her colors. I totally geek out over knitting. I could talk about it all day long. This is Gilligan's Island. And I loved all the bright colors in this one. I bought 2 skeins of this, so hopefully I can get a shawl, a fun shawl out of that. And there are just so many colors that she puts in this one, which actually reminds me of another one that I have. I never made this connection before. So it was really funny because as I was getting ready for this podcast, I was looking for all her yarns and I was like, I know I have a skein of this. Where is it? And it was like the first time that this has ever happened to me where I couldn't find a skein of yarn. I know where everything is. It's all jumbled all over my room, but I know where every single skein of my yarn is. If you asked me where it was, I could go right to it. I could not find the skein. And then I realized that I had added it into my sock bin for my 12 socks this year for my sock challenge. So this is doodle art. Oh, I love those colors. And it's like splashes of colors in between black. I can't wait to knit with this. It's going to be so funky when it's knit up. But it kind of looks like the same colors as the Gilligan's Island with just black in between them. Never noticed that before. Anyway, I love it because it's not primary colors. It's definitely, you get these tealy, it's like a mint. It's a very light teal, if you will. That's not, I think that's showing a little bit better. Yep. And then the oranges that she uses, it's like a coral. You'll get some corally. It's way too bright. They're not coming out super perfect. And this pink is like pinky purple. Like they're not red. It's not primary. It's not these, they're secondary or tertiary. Anyway, I really like those ones. And my last is the China Blue, and she has a skein of this. I checked last night in her shop. She has a skein of this in her shop right now. I bought a sweater's quantity because I just love this. I love the blue sections and then white sections, and then it's all sparkly. It reminded me And the name, China Blue, it reminded me of Royal Copenhagen China, and I instantly had to have a Swedish quantity. So that is Kaleidoscope Dyeworks. Please check her out. She's from Alberta, Canada. I don't know if I mentioned that. It's beautiful, squishy yarn, and her colors I just love. And then on to spinning. So for spinning, I wanted to show my Lazy Kate. So I'm gonna go and get it and cut this out. That was a huge fail. Okay, I wanted to show my Lazy Kate because Anna was asking about, well, you weren't even asking. You were trying to come up with a better option for your DIY Lazy Kate. So I just wanted to show you my setup and how I use it. And maybe this will help other people with their drop spindle two-plying setup. I just had this box laying around and I put a couple holes in it on either side. And so what I do is I'll put the yarn on toilet paper rolls, and Jennifer had pointed out you can put it, you don't have to cake up your singles, you can put them directly onto your knitting needle or a straw. So I'll use the holes to put my knitting on. I feel like I'm doing a little diorama here. And so this is how I set up my two-ply. So I'll put one at top and one at bottom, lay it down, and pull from both to do my two-ply. So this is my Lazy Kate setup. If anybody else has some other DIY way of setting things up, I would love to hear it. I'm all about coming up with more efficient ways of doing things. So if there's a better way, I'm on it. I also wanted to share, I showed this once before, but I'll show it again. My Nitty Knotty, it's a 1 yard Nitty Knotty, so I need to invest in a bigger one, but this works for right now. It comes in 2 pieces, put it together like that, and it works really well. And this is from Katrinkles on Etsy, and I'll put a link in the show notes. And then she ships it like this, and I just keep it on this. It's a cardboard with elastic, and it makes it for easy travel, and you don't break it. I believe it's made out of bamboo, but don't quote me on that one. It's perfect. Works for me. And that's what I use for my Lazy Kate, and then winding off the 2-ply onto my Nitty Knotty. My whips are Bumblebee Acres Rolags, which were these. I've spun a 2-ply using the horizontal draw. This one I soaked. This one I have not soaked yet. And you can tell that the colors all blended together on this one. The yellows aren't as golden yellow, and you can't, like, the colors pop more here, and they got a little bit muddled on this one. So I need to come up with a way when I'm soaking them to not have the colors bleed. And I think you can do it with vinegar. If anybody has any suggestions that they'd like to share, I don't plan on soaking this anytime soon, so maybe you can tell me how to soak my yarn so that the colors don't run into each other. But I love this. Look at you can see like the big chunks of sparkle. I love that. It's so cool. I've been getting better at the horizontal long draw, and I love this yarn that it's producing. It's so lofty and squishy and airy. I love it. This is good. Yeah. So that's the Bumblebee Acres. Oh, I have the card. From up on Poppy Hill. And then I'm also spinning my Classy Squid Fiber Co. her turkey trot roll eggs, which look like this. And I love these colors together. I'm not a huge fan of brown, but I bought them because they looked really neat and the slubby silk noils looked cool. And here's my 2-ply that I've soaked. And I always think that 2-ply is supposed to look like commercial 2-ply, like the marl that I'm working with. Like it's much tighter and balanced and uniform. I think that's what 2-ply is supposed to look like. So when I ply my yarn, I'm like, it looks so loose. I mean, it works. And this is actually getting better. I think it's getting, it's tightening up from what I first started doing for a 2-ply. But it's still not super balanced, although it is getting better. Anyway, here's the second roll egg that I worked on. And you get more of that blue. This one, the blue kind of got cut off. I had saved it, and it's actually in this one because my 2 singles were different lengths. But there's the blue bits, and my husband really likes the color, so maybe I'll knit him something out of this. I'm extremely happy with both of these. Both of these I'm doing the horizontal draw, which I sort of demonstrated in another episode. Like I said, I'm getting better at it. It was definitely much easier on this fiber. And so I wanted to talk about the contents, fiber contents of the fiber a little bit, just because they are different. So the bumblebee is mostly cormo. I'm obsessed with cormo, and I will share more on that in another episode. I love cormo. It's so soft. And okay, so cormo, it derives from Corriedale and the super fine Saxon merino. That's how you get the blend. That's how you get the cormo sheep. It produces a long staple. I'm sorry, I'm reading off my show notes. I can't remember all this information, but I want to share it with you guys. It produces a long staple, high-yielding fine wool fleece, and it has a high degree of fiber uniformity. They are also known as an easier sheep to keep on a farm, and they would definitely be the sheep that I would keep on my farm, because I love cormo. And the staple length is 3 to 5 inches. It has good elasticity, which means it's got good memory, good bounce back. And they have a low amount of veggie matter in their fiber, and they are pure white, like a really dense white wool. They don't get super dirty. I don't know if that's true. The micron count is 17 to 23, and I got this info from a Spinning Loft post, which I will put in my show notes. And this one, the Classy Squid Turkey Trot, is Falkland and Shetland breed with the silk noils. So Falkland isn't actually a breed, it's the location where the sheep are found. And it's an island off the coast of Argentina, or islands. Is it a group of islands? Yeah, islands off the coast of Argentina. On these islands, you'll find a mix of Romney, Merino, Polwarth. Okay, Merino and Polwarth with a history of Corriedale and Romney breeds have been found on these islands. The Falkland has a high quality fiber with low kemp or veggie matter. Staple length is 3 to 6 inches and it's 18 to 33 microns. So it is that longer staple than cormo, and it's a thicker micron, which makes it a little bit rougher. It's not as soft, but it's easier to spin with. It's a good fiber for beginners, kind of like a BFL or a Polwarth. I say that in a question because I mean it in a question form. I think Polwarth is a longer staple, which is good for beginner spinning. Again, I just make things up sometimes. Sure, I'll put it somewhere up here. And Shetland. So Shetland is a location, but it's also a breed. So people get confused sometimes when they're talking about Shetland wool, because Shetland wool could mean any fiber from a sheep from the Shetland Islands. Islands. But Shetland is also a breed. So maybe next time you see something that says Shetland, pay attention to if it says like the breed Shetland or if it's Shetland wool, which could just mean any sheep fiber, or Shetland fiber, which comes from the breed. Okay, that was like the same thing, 20 different ways. So Shetland fiber, 11 natural colors from black to white and everything in between. There's like dark brown, dark gray, light gray, like 11 natural colors can be found in the Shetland breed. And there are 2 types of Shetland fiber. One is called kindly, which is fine, soft, defined crimp fiber. The other one is called beaver, which is coarse with very little crimp. And the staple length is 4 to 5 inches. The micron majority falls in between the 20 and 30 micron range. And this is also a good beginner fiber because it's easily managed with good versatility. And the majority of what I just told you is found on Into the World, which I will also put in the show notes. Yeah, so that's it for these 2. I hope that information helped a little bit. Oh, cormo's so soft. I like the way that the, I believe people call them more rustic fibers. I like the way that they look, but I just like softer fibers. This one looks like so bouncy and puffy. Okay. And so I'm going to continue on spinning those rolags, both of them, the horizontal draw. I'm practicing my horizontal draw. I'm enjoying the yarn that I'm producing doing that, so it's really cool. And I think this week I might dip into my apples from Classy Squid Fiber because I'm getting anxious to do other things. I'm not getting bored, I just have so much new fiber that I had bought that I just want to play around with more. But those are her apples group, which has a bajillion different things in it. So if I spin these, next week I'll talk about those bajillion things. But I think that's what I might dip into this week. And that's it for this week's episode. Thank you for joining me. Please come back next episode. I will be talking about my March swatches. They'll be done and over with. I've got one more to do of the herringbone stitch. And I'm going to talk about the short row shaping, and I'll also make that page next week in the group. Go over to the group, join the group, say hi, introduce yourself. Next week I want to talk about my favorite hand spun yarn shop on Etsy, And next week I want to try and have a little video clip of Tel Aviv, show you guys where I live. So I hope you enjoyed the show. I hope you join me next week. Have a good weekend. Thanks. Bye.